Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Iblis Manifestations podcast. This channel features lengthy off-limits conversations with various different artists and entrepreneurs, predominantly from the underground metal scene. We take deep dives into the topics of life, music, spirituality, and take insight from a variety of thought-provoking perspectives from personalities who you don't often hear from in a mainstream settings. I am your host, Cheyenne, and I was originally born and raised in Iran and currently reside in the UK. I am the frontman and founding member of the black death metal band TRIVAX, who have been active since 2009. The band originally started in the Islamic Republic of Iran, where such type of music is banned as well as a punishable offense. You can check the band's pages for any updates on tour dates as well as new music. I am also a personal trainer and an online fitness coach who specializes in people achieving the best versions of themselves physically and mentally. Having been someone who was once extremely out of shape and overweight, I find it to be my duty to be able to pass on the information and knowledge which I've gained to help others achieve the same transformation. The Iblis Manifestations podcast also features a variety of solo episodes where I discuss personal experiences and anecdotes in a very candid fashion, covering everything from mental health, spirituality, philosophy, and even paranormal experiences. This is the Iblis Manifestations podcast. To support it, be sure to subscribe to the channel and visit the link in the descriptions.
It's great talking to you, Cheyenne, really. And best of luck to your endeavors with this podcast. I think it's a great initiative.
You're my favorite person to talk to for interviews and stuff. So I love what you're espousing out here. I love the knowledge and the perspectives that you're curating through this, and I'm just so honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
As I told you, it was one of the most interesting interviews I've ever had, because we talk a lot more things than just music, and I really appreciated that.
I respect you deeply, and it's an honor to be here.
And friends, remember as always, better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. Enjoy the podcast. All right, Chris, brother, welcome to Iblis Manifestations. Welcome back, I should say.
Yeah.
It's really good to have you on here, man. How you doing this evening?
It's an honor, again. And this time we're just the two of us. So, yeah, I'm doing fine. All good. Still, a lot of stuff to do every day. Pretty much finishing up a lot of stuff of the new album currently. The whole production cycle is done now. And now it's all about all the other stuff. There's so much stuff to do, really. So yeah, I'm pretty much in the midst of that right now. And the days never have enough hours currently.
Oh man, if there's a more relatable thing I've heard recently, I don't know if it'd be anything other than that. There's just not enough
cycle, right?
Yeah, there's not enough hours, and then there's not enough weekends in 1 year, I think.
Well, the weekends don't really matter to me because it's all the same. I'm just working through 7 days a week, so yeah.
Gotcha. Well, it's the Saturnalian nature of the world that we live in, which I guess is somewhat relative to also the name of your band. I wanted to say, obviously, you've already been on the podcast once. You kindly made an appearance when we did an interesting conversation between obviously me and yourself, and also Dial Patterson from Cold Never Dies, good friend of ours, and also Adrian Baxter, also a terrific designer. And yeah, it's good to have you on here for this one-to-one chat, and I think that there's a lot of people who really want to know what's going on behind Schammasch and a lot of the stuff that you guys got going on. But also, I know that you're very much involved just as an artist and as a creator, so I think perhaps this will be a great chance for everyone to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit and then see what's going on behind the scenes, as they say. But first of all, I just want to ask you, how was the anniversary shows that you guys did? 15 years of Schammasch. First of all, actually, congratulations more than anything.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just one show we did in Basel in our hometown, and it was really good actually. Like much over the expectations we all had, I think, because it was like 100. I don't even know, like 130 minutes or so, something that we played, a little over 2 hours, and it's been the longest show we've ever done. And also the most complex set we've ever done, apart from playing the whole Triangle album at Roper in like 2017, I think that was. But yeah, it was like pretty intense to get ready for this show, because we had to relearn like pretty much the whole contradiction songs that we played. We didn't play all of them, but a big part. And the only one we've ever played for the last like 5-6 years or so from that album was Golden Light. So that was the only one we still have ready, basically, and all the other stuff we had to relearn, and even I had to even transcribe the whole all the songs, all the contradiction songs to having like a 3-guitar live setup, because we didn't have that back then. So that was also quite a challenge. And it took like, I don't know, we've prepared for like 8 months or something for this show, just for one single show. And it's not like it was like in a giant venue with like 1,000 capacity or so. It was maybe 250 people. It was I think close to sold out, or it was sold out, I'm not sure. But it was a bit of an absurd thing to just like, for a rather intimate show, putting this whole effort on, but it was really worth it, because we've had people coming from all around the globe, like from fucking Australia and New Zealand and Texas and I don't know where. Like it was really crazy, and I wouldn't have expected that. And obviously that was a lot of pressure, because you don't want to put on a bad set and a bad evening if people come from half around the world and spend probably their like savings on this whole trip, because Switzerland isn't exactly the cheapest country, as you probably know, and the flights and stuff. But it went really well, and we played really well. It was like everything worked out really nicely, and it was a great evening. Really, it was definitely worth the effort. So that was a worthy anniversary, I'd say.
That's awesome to hear, man. Like you say, you put it down very well, saying that you go through all that effort just for like a 250 capacity show. And I think, from my school of thought, I think, why wouldn't you do that? You know what I mean? But I also think
exactly that was exactly my thought, because otherwise I wouldn't have done it. But it's like a one-time thing. The band got 15, the Contradiction album got 10, so it was like a double anniversary. And how the hell could you not do any like kind of special setup for this occasion? Everything else wouldn't have done it justice. So that was definitely the right thing to do, even though it was a lot of pressure and a lot of extra work besides getting the new album done. And it came all together pretty much, but it was really worth the effort.
Did you record it or anything like that at all, or was it just for the one occasion?
No, I played around with the thought in my head to record the whole show, even just on audio. We decided against it for various reasons. And We might do that on the next anniversary, which is just around the corner. It's going to be 2016 when Triangle has its 10th anniversary.
Years.
So then we're going to have to play this whole fucking record again. And who knows? Maybe we're going to record it, and we'll see about it. I mean, it's always the risk of, like, recording a show. And, if it turns out not to be great one, then you don't really know what to do with it. But yeah, I hope, it's going to be also worth the effort again.
I mean, it's the thing with that is that it's also a pain when you're recording shows because, especially if it's close to you releasing an album. I mean, I'm making this example because it's literally just happened to us in TRIVAX, where we recorded the show. It was an anniversary show. Again, very small, very intimate, but great atmosphere, great energy. And then we recorded it. We're going to turn it into this whole fucking DVD. And then since then, we've released a new album, and now we're going to be releasing another album. And none of that stuff was played at that particular show because none of it was released yet. So it's like, and then it doesn't make sense to release something that doesn't represent your newest stuff. So it's just this mind fucking scramble. And it's the pain in the ass of trying to make sure that everything that you release matches, because live production also, if you want to take a live show and then turn it into, I don't know, a DVD, I mean, think of how much time it takes to just put the editing of the videos together. And if it's audio, that's still basically just as long as of mixing an album. To do that, sometimes maybe even longer, depending on kind of what you're actually dealing with there. So and with your style of stuff as well is quite elaborate. There's so many layers and different things. I can't imagine that would be the easiest thing in the world to do.
No, really. I mean, we got the advantage of having 3 live guitars, which helps a lot with all the layering, which was very difficult to do beforehand when we were just 2. As you say, like, there is so much effort going into doing a live record, and I mean, so many things have to fall in place correctly. And we had the same, one of the reasons we didn't do it with this one was pretty much what you just mentioned, because, like, we're having a new record in start ready to be released late summer, and a bit later, I think it's going to be October probably. I mean, why release a 15th anniversary album, live album, when you release a new album like a couple of months prior or a couple of months after? And it's not really, the timing just wasn't right. And these things really have to fit into the whole process, and like it has to make sense. And it just didn't work out this time.
It's interesting because the way I look at it sometimes is that when it comes to doing any releases with the band, and perhaps, who knows, maybe I'm an overly sentimental person, but I wonder if you relate to this. To me, it feels like every time you release an album, it's almost like your back catalog is a map of your legacy. So you want to be very careful with how you put stuff out, when you put stuff out, if you can control it, because then at the end of it, when you look back, that's almost like that's the summary, that's your legacy, that's what you've left behind. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I'm really exactly the same when it comes to these things, and it's sometimes I find it hard to look back and accept certain decisions from younger years and stuff, like
Sure.
But of course, it's part of the process, and it's part of a development, and you grow, and things change over time. But sometimes it would be nice to just have that little time portal and fix and correct some things.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I do feel that, but then again, even the imperfections are part of what gives it the charm, what adds it to what it is, like just like a hypothetical example probably that everyone thinks of is the fact that, like, let's say on And Justice for All, I think the fact that there's no bass on there is almost a part of the album's charm, because you can see that ego struggle during the production, and then that's what led to the album sounding the fucking way it does. It's not the best sounding album, but it's still a very special record in that sense.
It's the best Metallica record. To me, it is definitely. And
I think in terms of composition, it's up there for sure.
Yeah, composition and character. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's definitely a weird kind of sound, but also like it complements the whole production. And to me, it's definitely by far the best Metallica record.
Yeah, man.
Funny that you mention it, because I'm always. I think I've met one other musician that really had the same opinion about that, but everyone else is usually not going for Justice for All.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your favorite Metallica record?
Oh, that's a very tough one, because the way I look at albums, not to give like a super long-winded answer, but the way I look at albums is that, say, to me, let's say as an example, Master of Puppets is special because that some of the other stuff exists in another album. Like, let's say if Master of Puppets was their only album, it would be less exciting than to know that its predecessors also exist, because I think that the albums before give it character, or maybe even in the context of extreme metal, I've made this example before, but to me, let's say in the case of a band like Watain, I think Lawless Darkness would be less exciting if it didn't have Casus Luciferi and Sworn to the Dark before it. So I kind of like have this weird relationships with album in general, which is why I am actually, if you ask me what my favorite albums of all time are, I'm actually more lenient towards live albums, like, let's say, Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous, Motorhead, No Sleep Till Hammersmith, or Deep Purple, Live in Japan, or even, let's say, Rebirth of Dissection. These are all probably like my top favorite albums of all time, and it's because it has a collection of those. But just to kind of give you an answer for Metallica, it's I don't know. I think it's like a weird cusp of perhaps Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, but I would say And Justice is very much up there,
Yeah, that's the usual answer I get when asking.
I know there is, but saying that, now to add a little bit of controversy to that, I would say Death Magnetic is probably also one of my favorite records by them, and everyone hates that album. Yeah, no one understands that record, but I think that it actually, despite the shitty mix, obviously Rick Rubin did a terrible job on that album. But not slating him as a producer, just I don't think that that collaboration worked very well. But
it was still better than the previous production, wasn't it?
Sure, yeah. At least the snare didn't sound like a fucking bin, But but no, I really like Death Magnetic. I think if people give some of the riffs a chance and actually play them on the guitar and think of again how genius it is to be able to play and sing those songs at the same time, maybe they'll appreciate it a little differently. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it's just me.
Well, I think it's also worth mentioning when we're actually having this fucking weird conversation. I had no idea how that came up now, but
yeah,
I mean, definitely worth mentioning that, coming from something like Saint Anger to like an actual album, like Death Magnetic is an actual, it works in various ways much better than the previous one did. And I think coming back from that, they had like a huge personal crisis in so many ways back then, and coming back to making an actual album, like a solid rock album after like those things. I think that also plays a part in that story.
Absolutely. This reminds me of a really funny story that happened with me. Not to go on too much of a tangent here, just on Metallica.
Yeah.
But obviously for me, like to people who follow this podcast, I'm sober, so I don't drink, I don't smoke, nothing like that. Yeah. I just do the yearly DMT trip, and that's it. Obviously, a person of extremes, I can't fucking help it. But once upon a time, I did used to smoke quite a lot of weed, and I'm talking about maybe about 10 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. One thing I used to try with is is I would obviously, get really stoned and then listen to different albums just to see how different they would sound, almost like as a kind of like an experiment on myself, because it does make a difference, and especially that's when you get to realize how genius some of those albums from like the 60s and 70s really are.
Yeah. I definitely know what you mean. Like I've had many, I mean, not many, but I've had a couple of very, very good experiences on psychedelics as well, listening to certain albums and actually discovering certain musicians like Björk. That was one of that was like thanks to a great LSD trip, I discovered that music because that gave me a lot. And I've never listened to any of her stuff beforehand, or I didn't find any interesting components in it. And while listening to, I think it was The Bachelorette, that one song, we listened to the whole album, but especially that song just completely threw me off, and it was so magical. I remember next day waking up and I was like, fuck, I gotta find this song. What was that song called? I had no idea. But then I started to, look up the lyrics and stuff and found it and listened to it like 20 times in a row. And same happened with The Devil's Blood, actually. Like the very first time I took acid with a friend, she kind of introduced me to The Devil's Blood. Like, I mean, I've heard it before back then, but it didn't really, click properly. And same happened to me. Like one or two songs from the time of No Time Evermore was really like and blew my mind in that moment. And that was such a beautiful thing. And actually, the Paradigm of Beauty song from the last album, that was kind of an homage to a lot of stuff that was in connection with The Devil's Blood and what happened to me in that moment and stuff. So yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, never underestimate the positive effects psychedelics can really have, and the experiences you can really make. Never underestimate the bad ones either.
Yeah, but I think even the bad ones can be very good for you if in the sense that
word. I mean, they can be good teachers, definitely.
Well, yeah, exactly. What I mean is it doesn't have to feel nice for it to actually have an impact on you and give you something that you actually need more than anything. You know what I mean? I mean, I've had very good ones. I've had also difficult ones as well. But I'm kind of grateful for all of it. But just coming back to that, by the way, I've experienced The Devil's Blood. Actually, I took DMT on a night in March 2014 when he passed away.
Okay.
That was along to their music. So, but that's a different story. I won't be getting into that just today. But needless to say, it was extremely powerful and beautiful. And you have a point. Like it just like this is it's one of them things. Only people who've done it will really understand, because it's such a different way of experiencing music when you do it through psychedelics, whether it's through LSD, mushrooms. DMT is a little difficult because you like the whole reality just melts, but it does kind of like add into the experience in a way. I always used to find Eric Clapton's Layla to be really powerful for a DMT trip, actually, to get into it. Just something about it was good. But coming back into Metallica's Saint Anger. So this was one thing, for me, I was like, everyone talks shit about this album, but I think some moments and some songs are okay. And obviously I listened to when I was younger, before I really understood metal, like I still listened to Saint Anger when I was in Iran, and I didn't think too much of it being different because I didn't have anyone else around me saying, oh yeah, the snare sounds shit. I just listened to the album for what it was. And at that moment, I actually thought it seemed okay. And then obviously years later, I kind of realized that. But just to kind of like put like a little knot at the end of this story. so around 10 years ago, I was like, you know what? Everyone talks shit about Saint Anger. Let me get stoned and then let me listen to it. And I bet I'm going to discover something good. So lo and behold, I obviously got stoned and then put on the album. And then from the very first song, as soon as the drums kicked in, I was almost having a panic attack. I was like, holy shit, this is the worst fucking album I have ever listened to. So
Oh, I thought there would be some redeeming qualities to this experience.
there was absolutely none. That was the first time I realized how shit it actually is. So
yeah, I also have a funny story with that album. Really, like, I mean, it's not really a story, but it's just a funny fact that it was actually along with Peace of Mind from Iron Maiden, which is one of the best metal albums ever for me.
absolutely.
I bought, along with that album, I bought Saint Anger. Those were my two first metal records I've ever bought in my life.
Wow, quite the contrast there.
Yeah, so one of the best really with one of the worst ever. But I mean, exactly what you said before, like back then, like some friend introduced me to the Reload album in high school. And I've heard like some Maiden before and stuff, and listened to some old school punk and some new metal shit as well back then, when I was like, I don't know, 12, 13 or something.
How old are you now?
I'm 36.
36. Okay, cool. Yeah, I imagine that we would probably be around like a similar age.
Yeah, what are you?
Well, I'm 29 actually, turning 30 this November. But
oh, really?
Everyone thinks I'm like 10 years older than I am, and that's okay.
I would have said maybe 33 or something.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you went a long way with just those couple of years.
I think so. Yes. Yeah. No, but yeah, it's one of them things anyway. It's more to do with your, on a physical level, it's more to do with your mitochondria, and on a mental and spiritual level, it's more to do with the kind of shit that you have to put up in your life.
Yeah.
So that's the way I define age.
Yeah, that's a very good definition, I think. And yeah, I'm sure you went through a lot of shit. And actually, really, just as a side note, when we're talking about that already, it's really cool that, with your roots, where you came from, and how you turned your stuff around, that's really like that's one of the things that made me look into your stuff. Actually, when I read or heard the story, I don't know where I picked it up, maybe on Instagram or so, no idea. But yeah, that was very intriguing to me, and that deserves a lot of respect, and really, like, yeah, I mean, you did a very good job with that. So, like, said in a very simple and uneloquent way.
No, I really appreciate that, man. Thank you. That's very kind of you. And yeah, it's kind of like, I look at it as an opportunity. I think like the entirety of life is just like it throws you, it throws you chicken shit, and your job is to make chicken sandwich out of it. And that's kind of the way I look at the whole thing. And I have got no complaints about where I came from. I have no complaints about where I grew up. I actually think that by Iran standards, I actually had a pretty decent upbringing anyway. And I got very lucky that I had super open-minded parents. If it wasn't for the two of them being open-minded and supportive, I would be no one, and I acknowledge that, and I respect them for that. But I've still had to go through a lot of trials and tribulations of my own, and it's not easy coming to a country, especially a country like the UK, on your own as a 16, 17-year-old, just to come here when you know no one, and then to start a black metal band. It's not the smartest idea in the world.
Of course not. And also, like, not just that you didn't know anyone, but also you came from a completely different culture, and that is really like, I mean, that takes a lot of balls, really. So yeah, congratulations on that, really. Like, yeah,
that's
a lot of respect.
Fuck yeah, man. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And the thing is as well, I think that what makes it cool is the fact that, I mean, whether it's me or even our bass player, I mean, he came from Syria. He had a somewhat of a similar upbringing, although he was actually arrested and tortured and all kinds over there. It's pretty bad. But, I think that none of us want like a special treatment or anything, like the thing that kind of brings us all together, just as you and I are sat here talking about Saint Anger, and all these other, obviously the other great releases as well, aside that one. It's that, it's the same kind of mission that kind of glues us all together. Like, it doesn't matter of what your sort of preconceived notions are
Yeah.
about it. We kind of have that same mission in mind, and we have that same sort of radical approach to art. If anything, I would say that what I learned from my experiences in Iran was that it made me look at metal and art in a much more
Yeah.
radical and in a much less compromising way, which,
Mhm.
by the way, is actually what I appreciate about you guys and your approach to music and your approach to making it, especially because I know that you've always had this very strong stance on prioritizing the hardships that goes into making art, not for the sake of it, but rather for adding meaning and definition to it. Now we've already kind of unpacked this a little bit on the AI front, but just generally speaking, I know that you're someone who puts a lot into their work, both in terms of the graphic designs that you do, but also in terms of music, and I think that that's sort of like, that's the kind of that very radical approach to it that I always appreciate and respect whenever I recognize, really.
Yeah, thanks a lot for saying that. That means a lot to me. I mean, it's always good to be appreciated for these things by other artists, and I mean, yeah, I gotta agree that it's completely correct. I put a lot of stuff into what I do, no matter what I do. I always put a lot of effort and energy in and because pretty much it's the only way I've got to know how to make quality art. It's never been, over the years I've seen some people, especially in the visual arts department, that can just seemingly just spill stuff out of their hands and their minds that is great without any effort at all. And sometimes that might be an illusion to some extent, but sometimes it can also really be true and a simple fact. And to me, that's always that's been very strange to see, because for a long time I always thought like going through severe self-torture, like mentally torturing yourself, not in like an not in like an active way, but like having to go through these processes is the only way to make things good when it comes to art, to make quality out of it and make it stand out and make it be unique. And yeah, that's the only way I've ever known to make it last. And it doesn't have to be that way. I've learned over the especially over the last 3 to 4 years, when I got much more active as a visual artist and got to know some great artists as well. Yeah, that was proof to me that it doesn't always have, good art doesn't have to go through this severe painful process to be good necessarily. But to me, it's the only way I've learned to do it, really. Like, there's no other way for me, and maybe there will be someday, and I wouldn't necessarily turn that down. But yeah, it still really is like it is, like with that new album as well again. And I've learned so much when it comes to like, the studio process. I've learned from my past mistakes, because the last production, Hearts of No Light, was really and not only that one, but especially that one, was a process of like a complete burnout, like mentally, and later on after the album release, also physically, through the whole COVID era. But yeah, the studio process was so tough on me that I really lost myself completely in this anti-creative spiral that just draws yourself in so deep that you have no idea anymore about like what's good and what's bad, what works and what doesn't. And
so when you say it was tough on you, exactly in what way was it difficult? Was it just a sheer workload, or were there any obstacles?
It was the workload at beginning, because it was like, it took like half a year, pretty much 7 days a week work on the album itself, like not just the music, but also I did the complete artwork on my own. And then I did.
It looks great, by the way.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I mean, looking back now, I could have done better with my nowadays abilities, but yeah, it's got a lot of character, and I'm still proud of it. But yeah, like that was first half of the hardship was really the workload, because it was so much. And I think I recorded guitars, just me in a little shed for 20 days straight. And you know, like even just that at some point, the isolation and like the creative process, like it really fucking draws like everything out on you. Like every little spark of energy goes into this thing, and at some point you really like, it fucks with your mind really. And if that wouldn't have been enough, then you know, then there's the next thing, and then there's the next thing. Then you're gonna go record vocals, then you have to perfect the you know, get the lyrics to a point where they couldn't get any better, or at least that's what I keep telling myself. And then it's the next thing, you gotta prepare the whole thing for a mix session, which is just that, preparing a mixing session. People have no fucking clue how much work this is. And of course, I mean, there's different approaches, and there's approaches that take less effort than mine, obviously, but even just preparing this mixing session took me like, I don't know, maybe 8-9 days or so straight, to just prepare files, to just bounce out stuff from my DAW, because the studio I went to for the mixing session worked on a different platform. So, you know, you have to get all the files out, and you have to decide which effects that are going to be bounced in there, like that are going to stay in the render, or which ones that you have to, you know, replicate in the studio. And, like, you know, so many little details that no one would ever think about. And then you go to a mixing session that lasts like fucking 11 days or so straight, and you have this whole pressure on yourself that, I mean, I have to say, I had this whole pressure on myself. I always have that huge pressure that I put on myself when finishing an album, to, you know, that feeling of, you have one chance to do this right, and if you don't do it right, you're gonna regret it for the rest of your life. And it's gonna be there cast in stone, like as a statement of your abilities, of your artistic journey, and you know, it really is, it's a huge pressure for me, and that in turn turns into something different, like into that kind of downward spiral I mentioned before, because you get to a point where you start losing your fucking mind, like literally. I've had producers tell me to chill the fuck out because I'm sounding completely crazy right now. That's what one of the guys mixing Triangle told me at one evening, and I had to, you know, kind of hear what he was saying, and also learn that he was right, because, you know, I get completely lost in the thing, and you start to hear stuff that isn't there. You start to, you know, focus on all these little things that might be hidden somewhere in the mix, and no one will ever notice them. But you are, in this moment, you're noticing them, and it's the worst thing in the world. And sometimes these little things can lead to situations where you don't know how to solve it. and you know that you're driving the person who's mixing the album with you, you're driving them insane as well, because they're on their wits end already.
Yep.
And you know, then you start to feel sorry for them as well, because you're always nagging on stuff that they don't hear, and like all these little fucking things. And
final mix version 999.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the Hearts of No Life mix was, I mean,
one thing that I really I got curious, because, you know, I mean, first of all, like, totally with you there, and I don't want to interrupt your flow too much, but I have to ask you this. So when you're saying you're spending 20 days recording the guitars, I mean, I've got 3 days of recording for our next album. You know, I'm going up to the mountains in Wales, and I'm doing the same thing, basically, you said, in a shed somewhere, you know, and then just blasting it out, not talking to anyone. And that 3 days, I mean, I love my guitar. You know, I've got my own custom guitar here by Abhorrent Guitars. Once I'm finished with those 3 days, I'm not going to want to look at the guitar for at least but when you're saying 20 days, logistically, that's a very long time. So just out of curiosity, I mean, how many layers of guitars were you doing?
Well, since the last album, since we actually, that was the first record that we've done as like a 3-piece on the guitars, like with 3 guitars in total as a live package. And beforehand, it was always just me and MA. And even though I used to do a lot of, like, I have this setup which proved itself very, you know, very successful for me, for my kind of songwriting, that I have 3 basic guitars, like 3 basic lines that are pretty much the skeleton of the song. And it's never really like, this is the rhythm guitar and this is the lead guitar, but it's always just like they're doing whatever they have to do in the moment that they do it. It's not like there's no roles, but it's just 3 guitar lines that make the basis of the song. And then there's however much leads and overdubs that there are. Like, there can be a lot. And
is there only the 3 guitars on the record? So what I mean is, like, how many layers of each one do you record? So in total, okay, so just 2
guitars. Okay. So like, it's basically recording 6 bass tracks for every song, 6 guitar tracks, because like the 3 are always doubled to make it to give it that little extra you know, chunkiness, and then there's stuff on top of that, leads and solos and maybe clean guitars or like effect guitars or even just like support guitars that do the same thing as the rhythm, or like the bass guitars, but like in a different harmony and stuff like that.
Right.
And I mean, sometimes there's fucking 10 guitars and playing at the same time, and then there's the bass, obviously. And yeah, I mean, if you do the math, then on like a 60 minutes record, then it leads to 20 days recording guitars. So yeah.
And every second of that has to be perfect.
I mean, to be honest, I'm not that much of a perfectionist anymore when it comes to guitar recording, because there's 2 factors. Because if you have 3 guitars that are doubled as a basis plus all the other stuff on top, that already gives you quite a bit of freedom for not like nailing every little fucking note to perfection, because no one's gonna hear it. And also there's always a delay on all those guitars, like a basic delay that I started using when writing Triangle. And I pretty much used the same guitar sound and the same guitar setup since then for all the stuff I did since then. So having that constant, you know, very, very spacey, echoey sound on the guitars adds to that freedom of not having to be perfect all the time.
For sure. And I guess sometimes it adds to the character of it anyway, doesn't it? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I think we actually have, just from listening to you talk about it, I think we actually have very similar approaches when it comes to recording, at least on the
Mhm.
guitar side of things, you know. So I always quad track as well, you know, it's
Yeah.
something that I've always done, you know, and it's what I'll be doing. And it just makes it sound better. But as you were explaining that, what I was thinking of is, I don't know if you ever knew this, but Rammstein's Sehnsucht album.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is the correct number, but I'm pretty sure there was something like they had 20 rhythm guitar tracks on that album.
Fucking Christ.
Yeah.
Never heard
Which,
about. I mean, that's just come on.
yeah. Yeah. Which I think the
After
way.
it's not gonna do any better, really. Like it doesn't do a difference. No one can tell me that fucking 20 guitars doing the same are gonna sound different than 10 because, like, how would they do that? But I mean, I guess they have their results, so you gotta give them credit for that, definitely.
I,
So
I think it might have been a case of, hey, we've got all this studio budget. How can we actually use it? But
yeah,
no,
well,
I think it's interesting because obviously, you know, with guitars, you know, now this is obviously a little bit more nerdy talk, you know, for the musicians listening to this as well, you know, but I think, you know, it's sort of like obviously the lesser gain that you have on the guitars, you know, but then when you've got
mhm.
more layers of them sitting on top of each other, you can
Yeah,
make
yeah.
it sound like that. I think with that particular album with Sehnsucht, you can listen if when you go back and listen to the album. Not sure if you're a fan of early Rammstein.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
yeah, they're,
yeah,
they have a lot of good albums, and yeah, they're a good band. No one can tell me any different.
for
I
sure.
mean, we don't have to talk about the other stuff that recently came to light. That's questionable, definitely. But yeah, in terms
Yeah.
of music, it is what it is, and it's great, really.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. We're on the same page there, man. And it was funny actually. I had a whole episode with Dogger from Miss Thurming just about this
Yeah,
particular.
I saw that a couple
Oh,
of
did you?
days. Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
it was funny because it started so randomly just about Rammstein. Okay, well, that's a way to start an interview.
There you go. It's Iblis Manifestations for you, man. We talk about anything and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why not? Why not? Of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, you know, it's interesting. So that's why I was curious to how you kind of layer those things with the Schammasch records. I mean, I feel like the whole conversation so far has kind of us been just edging towards this one very important question, which you've already alluded to multiple times. But what can you tell us about the new album that's going to be coming out? When is it going to be out? And what's the process been like? Please tell us. This is
Well, I'm
bonus.
not going to tell you too much because there's still, there's time for stuff. And for now, I don't want to spill too much. But as a lot of people already guessed, and it was pretty obvious from the start, was that it's going to be the continuation of the 2017 release, the Marlboro Chance, which was always bound to be like a series of releases, which I didn't really have. Yeah, it wasn't really much of a plan, but I just knew that I wanted to make a couple of releases dealing with certain parts of that book. It's like a 19th century surrealism classic. Like it's pretty much like one of the main inspirations that drove the surrealism movement. But yeah. It's the continuation of that, dealing with a different part of the book. I'm not gonna spill any details on the topic yet because people still have to be a bit patient. But it's gonna be announced soon. It's gonna be released. It's gonna be most likely October. And yeah, what else can I say? It's definitely different than all the other stuff, but also then again, like, every album we did so far was different than the other stuff, really. So
Exactly,
and that's also and that's also kind of it's not something I choose to do in particular, but it's something that just always develops as it does, and I think that to me is a very good thing because it shows it shows to myself that I'm still creative, that I'm still finding new inspirations, and that I still have the energy to explore new things that I didn't do in the past, and try different approaches and go into different directions. It's definitely going to be a bit on the slower side, a bit more of that monolithic, slow darkness that we used to have in some tracks before. But it's a lot more of that, definitely. There's also a lot of what's the right word? Maybe romanticism, because that's to me what definitely is a big part in the book. Apart from the perversion and the darkness and the surreal nature of it, there's also a lot of longing, a lot of emotionality, a lot of melancholy, and I kind of wanted to pack those emotions into the album. And also it's something that reflects in the lyrics as well. I mean, like, the lyrics are pretty much parts of the book that I've rewritten, like reworded many times, but the core messages stay the same. And there's a melancholic darkness to it, and some kind of romanticism that definitely wasn't part of the main records that we did so far, apart from the first Marlboro Johns record, which also had a lot of that, but in a different way, I think. And I mean, some people will even call it cheesy. Can't wait for that. But really, I couldn't give less of a fuck about these things. Like, it's gonna piss some people off. Some parts of it are definitely gonna piss some people off, and I'm fine with that. Good. I even long for that, really, because, as I said, it shows that there's still energy for trying new things, new paths, and not being afraid of change, which is definitely something that is an important feature in life generally. And even if it's not something that I can really tell is the case for myself and my life mainly, but at least in being an artist, it can be. And that's an important part to me when it comes to making art. Like really stay fresh, stay challenge yourself, and don't limit yourself into those same rules that from the past worked or used to work, or like that kind of feel comfortable, and step out of your comfort zones every now and then. I think that's one of the most important aspects of being an artist, really. And I think also by doing that as an artist, you can also maybe profit in your everyday life as a human being, because it teaches you as well when it comes to that.
Absolutely. There's so much obviously to unpack here, and of course I appreciate that there's a cap at how much you can share here with us at the moment about the new album. And of course, once the album is out and you rejoin us on the podcast, perhaps we'll get to dissect some of those details a bit further. Absolutely. But once, when I'm sort of reflecting on everything that you're saying here, there's like one thing that just constantly screams at me, and that's, effort behind art, and I really think that that's something that, it does add value to it, the whole ethos of bleed for your art, that we always talk about. Some people throw it around very easily without any real meaning or definition, but it's a real thing to me. So
also, a lot of people, I've seen it a lot of times on social media, start to being vocal about how ridiculous that stance is and blah blah, and how it doesn't have to be, and it's just like some catchphrase that people use to make their stuff more dramatic and shit, blah blah. I mean, maybe to some people they feel it like this, but to other people, bleeding for your art is, as I said before, it is, for me, is the only way how they know how to do it, and that's a completely legitimate way of doing it, really.
Well, I think that unfortunately, even the fact that people are saying that, or saying that that's okay, that sort of recyclable approach to music and art in general, which unfortunately has also made its way into the underground and black metal and what we do.
But it's always been like that, and also I think it's human nature really to like every scene has this kind of turning point where things that used to be special and used to be unique about it and used to be the qualities, the defining qualities of like a new kind of scene, whatever that might be, always tend to start recycling themselves and turn into like caricatures of themselves and start to become less valuable and just be starting to become catchphrases and standards that everybody has to live up to be part of the thing. And I think in black metal that has been going on for a long time now. And
I think the way I'm looking at it is that it's sort of like a reflection or a mirror, perhaps, of the greater culture of humanity as a whole, and it's that, I have a big problem with minimalism in general, whether it's in regards to architecture, whether it's in regards to art, music, and, or I don't know, cars. Like, these are maybe perhaps the more materialistic side of things, but perhaps even in the context of relationships, I feel like we've really sort of gone upside down on our priorities, even what we look for, it's not just what we create, but it's also what we try and enjoy. Like, people go to shows nowadays so they can take some pictures of it and post it on their Instagram story just to say that they were there rather than actually be there. And
sorry to interrupt you on that. It's just funny how no, fuck that, I'm not going to mention that. Sorry.
Sure. I mean, yeah, that's up to you, man. But the where I'm going with it, is that it's a general decline.
I mean, what I was gonna say, I'm gonna say that much is there was just like one of these happenings last week, which always reflects very exactly in that way on social media in a funny manner, I think, because it's like a serious thing really, but also it's kind of funny, like everyone has to share their deep experience of the weekend when it comes to the event on social media, and you can really see like a lot of the people I'm following it's just like, oh yeah, it's this again, okay, you were there, okay, you were there, okay, you were there, and it's always the same post really. And I'm sure some of them are absolutely coming from a worthy place, but also a lot of the time it feels like it's just like, yeah, I've been there and I have to show to people that I've been there and that I'm part of this thing, and it makes me somehow more valuable as a person or whatever.
Yeah. And listen, man, I think that, I think it's very interesting to hold a black metal event in Austria in the mountains. I think that makes it super special, and I think that it's cool to have everyone involved like that. But I also know what you mean about its interaction with social media. I think one step further to make something like that interesting would be to actually ban mobile phones at an event like that.
Yeah, that would be actually quite an interesting approach, I think. And I think that I could say that there's even some kind of notion behind some of the people who do the thing that this should be the case. I might be guessing here. I mean, I am guessing, but this might be the case, and it definitely would obviously complement the whole experience, I think. And obviously, like, it's just part of everyday life nowadays, and it's just the new normal, I guess. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like the worst thing, but it was just kind of funny that you mentioned this thing, and I just had this picture in my mind of seeing all the same pictures all over and over and over. But I mean, yeah, House of the Holy is really a one-off, like a one-time thing that doesn't exist anywhere else as it is, and
Exactly. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, I've never been, unfortunately, but my bass player went there, and I've heard the best things about that place, and I've heard terrific things about the organizers, and
there's really a magic
yeah.
inherent. Like you
Yeah.
can't ever deny that. There's like a certain
Absolutely.
magic up there that you never have. I haven't experienced that kind of
Yeah.
thing at any other event. But
sure. I think what perhaps you're more referring to, what we're talking about, is more just how people consume things. I think that's what
Exactly.
we're talking about. It's not a dig or you know, I don't want there to be a misunderstanding, but I think it's just how we as a modern culture, you know, basically take things in, you know. And listen, I'm guilty of it, you know. I take pictures of experiences that I have and stuff, you know, but I do always try and remind myself and say, hey, you know, you can still enjoy this even if you don't have your phone in your hand. You can still enjoy this even if you don't, you know, if you don't let every other fucking person know that you're here and you're doing this, you know. Because a part of it is as well, I understand this is, and I think this is actually very clever on social media companies, and please feel free to give me pushback on this if you look at this differently. It's just something that kind of has been you know, my gears have been turning in that direction lately, in the way that I understand things, you know. And it's that I think that modern day-to-day life is so fucking boring. I mean, no one like takes pictures or videos of themselves at work. Well, generally most people don't, you know, like no one deals with
a lot of
themselves.
people do. That's the sad part, but
Yeah.
not like people like you and I, obviously. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe if it's like a mental health nurse goth witch on Instagram who wants to virtue signal, that's a different story. But you know, that's maybe a different thing. But no one, like, for example, no one films themselves receiving like a customer complaint and then post it on social media. You know, I guess maybe in the realm of TikTok they do. But what I'm trying to say is that it makes the average person kind of have an opportunity to show the world, hey, look how cool my life is. I get to go to events like this, you know. And then it kind of just like makes you, I think it makes people feel a little bit better about themselves, in the sense of like trying to prove that, hey, I am not normal. I do interesting things, or I go to places where there's a buzz, or there's something, you know. And I think that this exists both in mainstream culture of everyone who pays like hundreds to go to Taylor Swift concert and be on their phone for the entire time, but it also exists sort of within underground black metal to an extent as well, I think.
Of course, absolutely. And to be honest, like, talking about phones at shows, like, fucking hell, it would be so great to just, you know, have people not be on their fucking phones all the time when watching a show. Really, like, it's just a plague nowadays. And yeah, I mean, I totally agree on what you said. Like, of course, there's some kind of maybe you know, how do I say that? There's got to be something in that it gives people to know, share their more special things they experience in life apart from their everyday life, and maybe show it to others. Maybe sometimes it's just like, you know, look at where I am and how cool that thing is, and it's somehow maybe makes people feel that they're elevated above others who can't afford these kind of things, or like, you know, don't have the possibilities to go there or whatever. I mean, there's got to be some kind of thrill in a very boring modern society life, and I guess it's these kind of things for a lot of people, really, and because there's not much else. Like, I mean, yeah, what else is there if you like live a normal life with an everyday job, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and you're sitting in a fucking office for the rest of your life, and you make like some money and you buy a nice car, maybe have some nice holidays every now and then. What else is there? I mean, yeah, there's got to be some moments that gives people those people the feelings that they're not just wasting their fucking lives in an office chair, and there is like other qualities to life than just that everyday normality. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, I mean, when it comes to social media, there's out of the question, like all the bad that it really does to society. We don't even have to start on that. But
Yeah.
I mean,
and the thing is, I don't want to completely like shit in everyone's cereal here either. You know, like if it makes people feel better and
Yeah,
if
that's
they
what
enjoy it, you know, who am I to tell them like not to do something? You know, but I think it's more just it's interesting to observe it, you know, and the direction that we're headed at. And I think that you know, like for example, just as someone who's in a band, I also, you know, it would be cool to do the odd show where there's no phones allowed, but also it's not a terrible thing, you know, because you probably know as well as I do that one of the ways nowadays, yeah, exactly, it's great promotion because all it takes is for someone to come to your show and then they post a story of you performing, and then someone who's, you know, sat on the toilet scrolling through their phones, you know, sees that story and they think, oh, this band looks cool, I'll check them out, and then they'll follow you and then they'll see more of your stuff, and then, you know, they might then eventually end up coming to one of your shows. And I know that this is it's a little bit cynical, it's very sort of like this capitalistic modern thing, but it's true, you know, like as a musician you do want more audience, and or rather than more audience, you want better audience.
Exactly.
You want quality audience, but the way to get to that, you still need higher numbers. You know, it's like it's still a matter of statistics. You know what I mean? But one thing I really want to unpack with you here is, you know, as we're sort of talking about the position of music in modern society and how it's sort of coexisting with the industry and how social media has affected it. As someone who puts as much effort into their music and into their artwork, and basically, you know, you pour yourself into what you're doing, what's your perspective when you hear stuff like, you know, people from Spotify coming out and then basically equating music to content and basically placing its value there? What's your sort of reflections and thoughts on that?
It's fucking insulting. I mean, what else could it be if not insulting, really? Like, Christ, I mean, what could be more insulting to a musician that puts his fucking heart and passion and everything he's got into his art, and then the guy from Spotify coming up and tells them that what they do is content and that the creation of it is completely free nowadays. I mean, there is so many wrongs in this statement. I can't even start to unpack it, really. Like, fucking hell. And yeah, I mean,
let's say someone's listening to this right now who thinks, well, what's wrong with that? Why isn't music content? Why can't you make music for free? What would you say to that person?
Well, first of all, how can you make quality music for free? Like, nothing is for free, really. Nothing you do is for free. And I mean, it depends on how you define you know, effort, because you can define it as financial effort, you can define it as time effort, you can define it as energy effort. There's many ways to define it, really, and all of these definitions are part of being an artist to me. Like, you're not free of any of them when creating your music or like your art, because you have to put in the time, you have to put in the finances, like in so many different levels, and even just from equipment to you know, all the other stuff that it takes to put out an album, especially as a new or a young band. And then also, third point, you have to put in huge amounts of time and energy, and there is no way around that, really. I mean, of course there is, but then I'm pretty sure that it's not going to be quality stuff that you're doing. And yeah, I mean, that brings us to the word content. Content is usually not very high value stuff, is it? Like, it's not very if you want to call it art, then, like, you know, that already kind of defines its value. And to me, content can't be art, and vice versa, really. Because content to me is something that fills up an empty void with more emptiness, and art to me is something that fills up emptiness with meaning, with experience, with value on so many different levels. That's what I would tell that person, really.
What if you were to say, and I appreciate what you're saying with that, but what if you were to say that content is neither the art itself nor something that's completely void, but rather a vessel to perhaps export that art in a shorter way to get it to the listeners so that they can at least be made aware of something greater that exists somewhere else? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, let's say, for example, you go on Instagram, you've got I don't know, let's say, let's make the example of the podcast. We have a 2-3 hour conversation, but then there's a 90-second reel on Instagram that shows us talking about different subjects. When one person sees that, that's content, right? But when they see that and then they like it, they go and check out the rest of the 2-3 hours of the conversation. So in that context, I think that content actually can also serve a value as well, don't you think?
Well, in that case, I wouldn't define the podcast to be art, because, I mean, of course, that's also kind of a definition matter, but
I mean, it could be a music video, it could be like a music video that's, let's say, 4 minutes long, but then the reel exists on Instagram that makes you then want to go check it out.
I mean, yeah, I guess I have to bow down to that idea. But at the same time, if the notion really is to create content in the first place, for it to be a proxy for art, which it usually means when people talk about content in terms of music or in terms of art, then that kind of takes that point away, doesn't it? I mean, then there is a lot of the value lost, because you're making content, you're making something to fill a void for something else other than its own cause, because you want more traffic on your page, because you want to earn money, because like some underlying motive, and not because of the art itself. That's what, to me, it implies, really. And yeah, I mean, I think that's where I draw the difference, really. If that makes sense. Maybe I'm a bit too old school when it comes to those definitions, but I mean, the thing nowadays that just drives me crazy, seeing it just feels like a lot of the time, it feels when I see what bands do nowadays in different sectors, not necessarily black metal at all, but like, more of the modern sectors like deathcore and stuff, where I have quite some clients coming in for design stuff as well. And obviously there's great stuff in there as well as there's bad stuff. And a lot of the time I see what those musicians are doing. It feels to me, and I might be wrong, but it feels to me that they consider themselves, and the business considers them as well, to be like 70% content creator and 30% musician, where it should be the complete other way around, as it used to be. Like, you should be a musician in the first place, doing music because that's what you love doing, not doing content because you want more traffic or you want more success with what you're doing. And the reason you're doing stuff becomes a different motive, other than the whole experience of making art, really. And I think that to me, it feels like one example, like this thing that starts to become a normality, apparently so nowadays, is for bands to offer these I don't even know what they're called, maybe you can help me with that, those like VIP tickets, I guess it's called.
Is that when they do like a meet and greet or something at the show?
That kind of thing. And maybe I'm wrong. I've never seen that like 10 years ago or so, but it seems to me like a very, very modern thing, and kind of a normal thing to do nowadays for a lot of bands. And to me, that's fucking prostitution. It's nothing else. And yeah, fucking hell, touring is so hard on its own. Touring, it takes so much out of you as a person to be on a tour with your stuff, and with all the backstory, all the effort that you put in doing music in the first place, apart from just touring, but also touring on top of all of that. And then you also have to prostitute yourself before or after a show, and you know, put on a good mood and meet some of your fans that paid extra to see you as a fucking zoo animal standing there and smiling and taking pictures with him. I mean, maybe to some people that feels like the right thing to do, and who am I to judge them? But I could never ever do that. That would feel so wrong, and it would feel so like, on tour you have to be allowed to have a shitty mood, or to be like fucking energyless, and to be, you know, at your wit's end in some moments. And just imagining having to come out there before or after every show, and then putting on a different show for a couple of fans who paid extra to see you, just to make a few more bucks to be able to finance your fucking tour. That's not how it should be. That's fucking prostitution to me. That's like, there is something completely wrong with this whole system. Like, the whole music business, when it comes to those things, that's never how it should be nowadays. And there is no stopping that either. Like, it is what it is. And you know, the reality of things nowadays are that ticket sales are getting lower and lower every year. There's more and more venues closing, more and more promoters stopping what they're doing, and it's a bad development. Things get more expensive. There's less tour bus companies every year, and traveling gets much more expensive. All that kind of stuff adds to these kind of developments, that a band really has to put themselves out there. And apart from doing all the work they're already doing, which is a lot, it's a fucking shit ton of work they're doing usually. Like, that's my experience, at least, and a lot of my friends' experiences who do the same thing. And if that's not enough, then they also have to stand there and make a couple of extra bucks by taking selfies backstage and allowing people to come there and put on a nice face. I mean, that's not really, to me, how it should be. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of things to unpack there, obviously. I think that, you know, it's one of them because you really wish that art and business were two separate things, you know, and they should be. Used to be, really.
Yeah, as they should be. And I think that's kind of where the lines get blurred. That's where things go wrong. I think not just for the artists, but even also for the people who are consuming this as well, you know, because people, I think for the most part, when consuming a band, when listening to a band, I think that especially in this style of music, people want to get something that's real. They want to at least have some kind of reassurance that there's something real and legitimate behind it, you know, which again, I think perhaps is what sort of accentuates the need for a podcast like this, because you get to see if someone's full of shit or not, you know. And I think that's what's good about it. You know, you get to see that someone actually means what they do, and I think that, you know, when you go to shows, like the worst thing in the world would be you love a band, you know, and you appreciate their music, you want to go to their shows and you buy their merch, but then the worst thing in the world would be to find out that they're absolute fucking posers, you know. And I think it's kind of a little bit like that. So ultimately, people who follow this music want to know that what they're getting is the good stuff, you know, and it's real and it comes from an honest place. And I think that the way I try and look at it is the following. As an artist, when it concerns like being in the studio, when it concerns you know, playing with the band, you know, like I approach that from an extremely selfish point of view. Like you know, in the sense of the satisfaction of the artist is paramount and it's priority above all other things. Right.
And also it's like the guarantee that it's not a guarantee, but it's the first thing that matters when when it comes to the quality of the, if you want to call it product, or like the result, it can never be to satisfy someone else apart from yourself at the very first moment, to me at least.
Absolutely.
To me, that makes sure that it's going to be a quality result, and an honest one. That's especially the honesty that can only come from satisfying yourself, really.
Yes, and I agree with that approach, and dare I say that's absolutely my approach as well. I think where it becomes a little bit more different is trying to put yourself in people's shoes. Well, what is this person getting from coming to the show? What are they getting from coming here? They got, like, I don't know, back and knee problems. They have to get time from work. They have to travel down. They have to stand there, and they just have to, like, watch this show. That this
they don't have to. Great. They choose to.
They don't. Absolutely, that is true. But
they choose to because they want the experience of experiencing that band, one of their favorite musicians or bands performing their art live in front of them, which makes for a completely different experience than listening to just a record, because there is all that energy, there is all that rawness and the reality of the moment. And that's why they come to a show, not to fucking come backstage and take a selfie with the musician. I mean, I hope that's the case, at least. Maybe I
think now I'm going to speak from the perspective of being a fan, all right? And I'm sure that not everyone maybe listens to music the same way that I do, but this is maybe just me. But to me, there's something about when I listen to a band's music, I feel like I develop a personal connection with the artists, even though I've never met them, I've never spoke to them. Now, obviously, because of this podcast, I'm in the unique position where I actually do get to speak to a lot of people who not only I appreciate and enjoy, but I've listened to and followed for many years, yourself included, by the way. Just
thank you, man.
I'm putting that straight there, man.
Appreciate
it. Absolutely, for me, that's part of what it is, is that you listen to this style of music and it invokes thoughts in you, okay? It invokes thoughts in you, and it's almost like you want to have a ping pong with the artist. Now you either take that and then imply it in your own life. It makes you look at things differently, but art to me is this continuous exchange of energy and the format of thoughts and emotions, which makes it a very powerful thing.
Absolutely.
When it concerns like going to a show, to me, meeting the musicians who are in that band is actually something that I find very memorable, something that I find actually adds a lot to my experience of that music or that band. Not now, I'm not saying I'm a demanding person who wants to take selfies with everyone. I actually don't really like taking pictures with people. I don't like asking for pictures anyway.
I mean, let me just interrupt you there for a second. I think there's one big difference. It's totally fine to approach a musician after a show, like if the moment allows it and it's not too intrusive or whatever. And like in a common sense moment where you see, okay, there's space for that now. I can approach the person and ask person, why the hell not? That's totally fine. And I'm not saying anything against that. But if you're paying for that thing, then there's a whole different layer to the whole to the whole situation, and that's
you're very right, because what it adds is expectations. I think you're very right about that. I think that's kind of where
expectations and also it kind of devalues the whole art form, really, like because you're being put in a position of being a zoo animal, really. Like I can't really. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the closest.
I know what the image that you're trying to paint. I recognize that in my own head, because it's a little bit like when I think was it Avril Lavigne that was like charging like $400 for people to like or however much it was. It was like a stupid amount. I wouldn't even pay like $1, with all due respect. Obviously, I'm sure some others would. But it's like it's like. you pay for that, and then like the fans weren't like allowed to have their arm around her or like have physical contact. They had to stand like just slightly next to her, you know, in order to be able to take the picture. And that the zoo animal thing that you're explaining, that makes perfect sense. I think that
Don't go too close, it might bite.
yeah. Don't feed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's so many wrongs in that situation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I think what I was trying to say, you know, and I appreciate I have very long-winded fucking way of saying things, you know, but it's that what I appreciate is that personal connection with the artist, because it almost feels like, because when you listen to a band's music, it's like you have your own relationship to it that literally no one else in the world knows about, no one else in the world would even understand if you try to explain it to them. You know, let's say if you go through like very certain perhaps pivotal moments in your life, whether it's difficult moments, things like that, and then music is usually one of the most powerful ways to get you through things, and that gives you that personal relationship with the artist. Now, as an artist, I would fucking hate to know that if I created that experience for someone else and then they came to a show and then I was a dick to them, and then they kind of, you know, that ruined that memory and that experience for them.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to do that, you know?
Exactly. And if you put yourself into the situation of being on tour, maybe being sick or like just fucking dead tired, and you have to stand there and put on a smiley face for the people who pay for seeing you backstage in that very moment, then I mean the chances are, I guess probably the chances are even lower than if they just approach you without paying for you, because you are paid for it and you have to fulfill the expectations. But then it's just not going to be real. Like, it's not going to be honest. It's just going to be, you're paying for a smiley face. That's what you're paying for. And you're not going to get the real person, most likely. I mean, I would know that in my case, it would be the truth, because, yeah, I wouldn't be up for that.
And there's different personalities as well. People approach this differently. I mean, but the thing is as well, it can be extremely fulfilling. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this, but you ever had it where like you might be tired and you might be kind of like cranky and not feeling the best, but then someone comes up to you and then they show you appreciation for your work and you can tell it's genuine, and that legitimately just lifts you up. You all of a sudden feel full of energy just after that one interaction. Have you ever had that? I'm sure you have, but to me that's kind of like where it becomes also like, you know, it's nice for the artist as well to know that, oh yeah, shit, people actually appreciate all that fucking suffering and the bullshit we went through just to create that thing, you know?
Of course, but to me, that doesn't necessarily have to happen in like a personal moment, like in a physical personal moment. Because I'm usually when I'm touring or when I'm playing shows, I'm very, you know, I'm very people shy, and I just retreat to the backstage most of the time and just want my peace and quiet, because to me the whole playing live thing is always like, I'm also the person who's responsible for the whole organization and everything, and apart from that stress, there's also the stress of obviously having to play shows, and to me that can be very, you know, very demanding and very, very exhausting as well. So I'm usually trying not to make myself available to people during shows, but yeah, what I'm saying is I've had many of these experiences online when people write us messages and or mails, saying stuff like, you know, our music changed their lives and stuff like that. And we've gotten many great messages, especially without the expectation of like, you know, I'm putting this out there now and I expect you to do something like with it and to give something back to me because I told you that. That's also an important thing to me, I think, because like if you're putting it out there and at the same time you're putting an expectation out there of, okay, I'm telling you that, and now you have to do something for me in turn. And I think that's the wrong approach. Like, there should be no expectations when it comes to that. And it's a beautiful thing to me if I get messages like that, genuine and respectful messages that tell me the value that my art had, or the impact, the positive impact on a person's life. That's one of the most fulfilling things as an artist that there are, really, like, absolutely. And it's one of the best confirmations of what you're doing has meaning, really.
So when we are talking about obviously content and all of these things and how that interacts with social media and things like that, you know, and obviously when we're pointing out to the fact that music, as these people have put it, you know, like you can make it for free and things like that. And obviously one thing that's very elaborate, as we've already kind of touched upon, is the production process for a Schammasch record. I mean, can you tell us just a little bit about that, if you can kind of pull the curtain back just a bit on the actual production and perhaps maybe even the mixing side of what it takes to do a Schammasch record?
Yeah, so we were talking about the Hearts of No Light production before, and that whole rabbit hole where I like got completely lost in that whole process, because it's such an elaborate process. And what I wanted to conclude from that was like the lessons I've learned going through this fucking hard process that it was last time with this new record, like, because I went into that whole process in a very different manner, like in a very much more relaxed mindset, I would say, because, you know, I went through these experiences quite a few times now, and that last one was so heavy that I think I just, you know, started to understand what can I do to make it better for myself, and what can I do not to get lost in those rabbit holes. You know, stuff like that session we had now for the new album was, I think, 10 days in a row, from mix start to master end. And you know, obviously, like, it takes even just a couple of days to even just put like every song into place and import all the files and stuff, because like the tracks are just immensely many. Like on one track we were one song we were about, like, I don't know, 130 tracks or some shit. Like, yeah.
Holy shit, that's a lot. So that's 130 stems.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a lot, man.
Yeah, and you can imagine how tough it is to start putting this into an environment where everything falls into place and starts to make sense. Obviously, I'm always coming prepared with like a pre-production mix I'm doing on my own, which is pretty elaborate in terms of, like, you know, guitar levels and pannings and all these little things and effects and stuff like that. But still, obviously, there's a lot is happening during the mixing process to like a lot of elements come on top of the thing that is already there. From in this case, Marcus's side, Marcus from Imperium and Division Bleak. He was the guy I mixed the album with, like Hearts of No Light, by the way, as well. And yeah, I mean, I've learned how to distance myself a bit better from the whole process. Like, I've learned to spot those moments when I start hearing shit that isn't there, or like, you know, feeling lost and feeling like nothing's good enough here and it's never gonna be right. And there is these moments come in every mixing session, and by now I know how to identify them, and I know how to identify them as bullshit, because, like, you know, the history tells me that so far it's always been right. It's always worked out in the end, and there should be no reason why it wouldn't be the case this time. And I can trust on my abilities to get it right. So that kind of helped a lot this time to not fall into these extreme rabbit holes. And even though I had my moments of, like, you know, self-doubt and starting to the drum sound is weird and shit like that. Like just random stuff that suddenly starts to feel different in your ears because you listen to this whole thing like 10 days in a row and over and over and over, and you start to overanalyze everything. And that's a very dangerous moment, and I think for me, I really have learned to distinguish these moments from reality, and that helped a lot, making this one a bit more relaxed and a bit less insane. And the result is still a very satisfying one. And it was funny with the last one. I always tend to, to fall into that place. Like the last one sounded so much better. Like, why doesn't this one sound like that? And that's also one of these little fucking, obstacles that your mind is starting to play tricks on you, because you start forgetting about all the fucking bullshit you went through last time and start putting it on a pedestal, because it was last time we nailed it, and this one is kind of in between and it's not really perfect, blah blah.
It's the perfectionist's curse.
Yeah. And then I got home.
I think there's also this element of, like in life in general, you always you romanticize memories. So times that were maybe not that good, you always remember him to be better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And it's exact that kind of phenomenon. And then I went home with the finished album, and I told myself, it's good, it's all good. You did a good job. But I didn't really believe it in that moment. And when I listened to it the first time after the studio session, I was like, fuck, this kind of feels weird. Like drum sound is weird. And like, I don't know, like it just didn't feel right. And it's so funny how this process always really comes along the very same time like last time. And then it took me, I think, 3 weeks ago or so, when I went to rehearsal on public transport, and I listened to it on my headphones, and I finished it, and I felt like, this is where it should be, and this is right. This sounds right. For the first time after like a fucking over a month or so, and even more than a month. And then I started remembering, like, it was the exact same thing with Hearts of No Light. I had this period of like 1 month or 2 months or so where it all sounded weird, and this wasn't right, and that wasn't right, and that could have been done better and shit. And then at some point you start losing this kind of
spontaneity, perhaps, and the spark of it if you overdo it.
Yeah, I think you also lose the memories of sitting in the mixing chair and trying to get this exact moment right or getting it better. You start losing these kind of little reminders that still tell you like this isn't as good as it could have been. And then at some point you start feeling that it's actually good. It's actually a well done job, and you lose these kind of all that little shit that's still attached to it.
I should also probably add that, for anyone listening, not every band, in fact, I think very few bands actually sit down with whoever's mixing the album to actually mix it with them. Usually it's just a process that the person does, and then they just send copies back and forth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that is very true. I would fucking go crazy, man.
Yeah.
Like, how much of a problem that would be for me, really. And I did that with Contradiction when I recorded it with Victor back then, Victor Bullock from Triptychon. And
oh yes, Victor.
He had the great pleasure of making like 4 different mix versions. And I still wasn't happy, but yeah, I mean, back then I was so unexperienced and had no idea what I actually want. So that always makes things very hard.
But then sometimes knowing too much of what you want makes it harder as well.
Yeah, the thing is, the contradiction between knowing what I want, but not knowing how to get it. And that's where the producer comes in, who does know the technique, how to make it better in certain ways that I don't, because I'm not a professional producer. And that can be the very tricky component here, because if you can't articulate in a technical way what you want done technically to make it sound like this and this, then it's gonna be guesswork from the studio guy, and yeah, I mean then it's gonna be difficult. But yeah, we managed to keep that at an acceptable level, I would say.
Well, listen, man, I'm super excited to hear this new album of yours, and I think it's gonna be a very special record. And this is the longest sort of length of time or a gap you've had between any of your releases as well. 5 years. So yeah, very excited, man. That's all I can say.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward about what's gonna happen with this thing and the reception of it, of course. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting seeing how people are gonna receive it. Really looking forward to it.
Absolutely, man. Listen, Chris, brother, it's been such a pleasure talking to you this evening. Thank you so much for your time and obviously making yourself available to do this podcast with us today. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing with Schammasch. I absolutely love what you're doing. And also, I look forward to having you jump back on here once the album is out, so we'll have another conversation lined up for that time as well.
We're gonna do that for sure. And thanks as well for the effort. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Is there anything you want to let people know before we wrap this thing up? And anything you want them to check out? Anywhere you want them to keep an eye out for the new record? When? Which label? Any of those kind of details that people should be aware of?
Yeah, not really. It's gonna be Prosthetic again for the last time. Then I'm gonna probably move on without a label. The contract is gonna be fulfilled. And yeah, I mean, actually, the label topic would have been a different one that would have been interesting to unwrap again as well. But maybe we can do that next time.
We will.
And yeah, just as for an ending note, I don't know, expect the unexpected, really.
There we go. You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Chris, one more time, thank you so much, man. And to everyone else listening to the podcast, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Be sure to support the fuck out of Schammasch on the upcoming album and any of the upcoming live shows. And we'll see you on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations.
Thank you very much, man.
Cheers.